I paid $5 for a ranch, but when I stepped inside, I found two Apache girls hanging from ropes in the middle of the house. And when I cut them down, I opened the door for a nightmare to walk into my life. Welcome to Wild West storytelling. Now, let's begin. Red dust curled in the air under the pounding of hooves, carrying with it the searing heat of the afternoon. Elias Ward pulled back on the reins, stopping before the sagging wooden gate of an abandoned ranch, the piece of land he just bought for exactly $5. To most folks in Dust Hollow, it was nothing more than a pile of rotting boards. But to Elias, it was a chance to walk away from a blood-stained past. The front door resisted with the groan of rusted hinges as he pushed it open. Light leaked through gaps in the weathered planks, spilling across the center of the room, where two bodies hung, swaying gently, not cold corpses. Their eyes were half open, breath ragged, rope biting deep into their throats. Two Apache girls, one older, one younger, their bare feet just inches from the floor, kept alive, only to prolong the torment. Elias lunged forward, pulling his hunting knife. The first rope parted under the blade, and the younger girl's light body collapsed into his arms. Blood from her shoulder soaked into his sleeve. He spun to the older one. Her deep black eyes locked on his, the look of a wild creature that hadn't yet decided if the man before her was savior or predator. The rope fell. She stayed on her feet, one hand braced against the wall, the other gripping the knife hidden in her boot. Outside, the wind carried the sound of horses, distant at first, then closer and closer still. Ahioka, the older sister, rasped out each word like it was clawing the air. "They're coming, and if you stay, you'll die with us. I'm grateful you've given me the chance to share this with you tonight. Tell me where you're listening from, and I hope wherever you are, you're safe and happy." Wherever you are listening to this story, Elias eased Naira, the younger sister, down onto the floor where thin shafts of light slipped through the wallboards, painting dusty gold stripes across the planks. Her left shoulder was torn open. The blood dried into a dark crust. He knelt, pulling out a handkerchief and wrapping the wound tight. Naira said nothing, only trembled faintly when his rough hands touched her skin. Ahioka, the older sister, still leaned against the wall, her black eyes cold as a winter lake. Her long black hair was tangled, her cheeks marked with the rope's bite. In her hand, a dagger caught the light each time a sunbeam slipped through the warped frame. "You're not one of Maddox's men," she said, her voice raw, but certain. Elias shook his head. "Never met the man." Ahioka didn't answer, only tilted her head as though she was listening for more than just words. Outside, the evening wind hissed through the gaps, carrying the scent of dry earth and burned grass. Elias stepped to the window, peeling back a warped plank. The ranch lay bare before him, an empty corral, a leaning storage shed, a fence line broken like it had been through a season of sandstorms. Far off, the red hills rose, glowing under the last hard light of the day, Dust Hollow. The nearest town was only 2 hours by horse. There, the law lived on paper, but reality was decided by how many guns you could line up on your side. Elias knew the name Maddox, a greedy mining boss who'd bought half the town, including the deputy. Rumors said he was hunting something valuable enough to trade an entire stretch of land for blood. Elias Ward knew that kind of life all too well. 5 years ago, he'd been a bounty hunter, riding from Kansas to New Mexico, tracking men both the law and decency had given up on. It paid in gold, but it cost him friends and any chance at peaceful sleep. This $5 ranch was supposed to be his way out, or so he'd believed. Naira's hand found Ioka's whispering something in Apache. Ahioka replied briefly, then looked at Elias with a gaze equal parts gratitude and guarded caution. The hoof beats outside were clear now. Not one horse, but many. The rhythm was steady, disciplined, not drifters. Ioka drew another knife from her boot and handed it to Naira. Her eyes flicked to Elias, heavy and certain. "They've been chasing us for 3 days. They tortured us and they're not leaving without something to show for it." Ias tightened his grip on the hilt of his own blade. He knew the kind of men coming. The only difference was this time the fight wasn't for a bounty. It was for two strangers, in a house he'd just paid $5 to call his own. Outside, the hoofbeats came heavy and deliberate, mingling with the dry clink of saddle gear. Elias pulled the window plank back into place, not wanting the glint in his eyes to give away their position. Ioka stayed close to her sister, both knives hidden neatly in her hands. "You have the right to walk away," she said, her voice low and strangely calm. "If you stay, you'll be pulled into a fight that isn't yours." Elias gave a faint, dry smile. "I thought quitting bounty hunting would keep trouble off my back. Then I paid $5 for this place, and it's got more trouble in it than any head I ever hunted." Ioka said nothing, but her gaze flickered just for a moment. A minute of silence passed, broken only by the wind seeping through the cracks in the wall. Then she spoke slowly, each word dropping heavy as stone. "We were taken because we know the way into the Spirit Mountain." Elias narrowed his eyes. He'd heard folks in Dust Hollow speak of a mountain the Apache called the grave of their ancestors. A place no outsider was ever meant to set foot. But Ahoka's tone wasn't campfire legend. "That mountain's not just a burial ground," she went on. "Inside is the largest silver vein in the West. Our people kept it secret for hundreds of years so it wouldn't be mined so the spirits could rest. Maddox wants that mine, and he'll kill anyone who stands in his way." Elias glanced at Naira. The girl clutched her wound, eyes wide, afraid, yet bright when the mountain was mentioned. "And only you know the way in." Ahyoka nodded. "A narrow pass open only in the rainy season and only our people can read the signs. Maddox doesn't need a map. He needs us." Outside the horses stopped. A man's voice rang out deep and thick with menace. "Ioka, we know you're in there. Take me to the mountain and I'll let the cowboy live." Elias muttered a curse, his hand settling on the butt of his gun. He hadn't bought this ranch to be someone's shield, but there was something in that voice, in the way it chewed each word, that made the blood in his veins run hot. Ioka met his eyes, her guarded look gone for the first time. "Help us reach the mountain and you'll walk away from this hole." Elias answered with a small, firm nod. Outside, the crunch of boots in the sand was already moving toward the door. The shadows of mounted men stretched long across the sunburnt ground. 5 riders came up to the porch, their dust-covered coats marked by the glint of steel revolvers and rifles catching the hard light. At their head was Bo Maddox, a broad-shouldered man under a low-brimmed hat, thick black mustache, eyes narrow and sharp as a blade. The way he sat his horse straight back, one hand resting lazily on the butt of his gun, told anyone watching he was a man accustomed to ordering someone's death. The 2 men flanking him were no less dangerous. One, tall and gaunt with hollow cheeks and a Winchester lying across his saddle as if at rest, though it would take only a flick of the wrist to bring it to bear. The other, barrel-chested and wide-shouldered, carried a sawed-off shotgun. A red scarf knotted around his neck, the mark of a Maddox enforcer. B reined in at the bottom step. His voice came low and growly, every word carved clear. "Afternoon, new owner. Heard you bought this place for next to nothing." Elias stood in the doorway, his hand resting easy on his revolver's grip. $5. Cost me more than it's worth." B's mouth curved, but his eyes didn't beat. "I'm guessing that bargain came with 2 guests. And they're what we came for." Behind him, Ioka stood still, her gaze sharp as a knife, while Naira edged back into the shadows. Elias kept his tone steady. "I bought the house, not the people." The tall one gave a dry, rattling laugh. "Didn't buy them, but you're keeping them." Bo tipped his head, eyes cutting through the gap in the door. "I'm not a patient man, Ward. Hand them over, and we'll ride out. If not," he touched his spur to his horse's flank, signaling the 2 flanking men to split wide, sealing off every way out. The evening sun lit the red dust, stretching their shadows like a noose around the house. Elias pushed the door open a fraction more, placing his gun hand where it could move without thought. "This house is mine. Anyone steps onto my porch uninvited pays for it." Bo chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "You've no idea who you're standing against, Ward. Well, take what we came for, whether you're still standing or not." Inside, Ioka was already moving toward the back door. Murmuring something to Naira, Elias caught the creak of the floorboards, knowing they were bracing for the worst. Outside, Bo rested a hand on his revolver, lifting his coat with the other to show the silver wolf-head pommel of a knife, the mark of Maddox's authority. "Last chance. Hand them over." Elias didn't answer, only the wind and the faint scent of gunpowder in the air like a warning of the fight about to come. "I'm grateful you're here." If this story stirred memories of the old days, red-dusted afternoons, the echo of hoof beats in your chest, then subscribe to my channel so each day we can sit together again and I'll tell you another tale from the Old West. Bo Maddox stood his ground, that half-smile frozen on his face. Wind swept across the open stretch before the ranch, curling the red dust into spirals. Elias was weighing whether to fire first or buy himself a few more minutes, when another sound cut through the thick, tense air. Hoof beats, not 3 horses, but dozens. The pounding grew heavier, faster, rolling in from beyond the ridge. Bo's eyes narrowed. The tall one gripped his Winchester tighter, while the man in the red scarf swept his gaze around. "We've got company," he muttered. From the west, a line of Apache warriors thundered into view, horses surging past cactus clusters in a haze of dust. They wore red-painted buckskins, their faces marked in black ash and ochre, eagle feathers streaming in the wind. At their head rode Chaza, war chief of the White Hawk, tall, broad-shouldered, draped in a deerkin coat embroidered with the sun, eyes sharp as a spear point. Chaza yanked his reins, his horse rearing and screaming before it halted. His voice rang out like a war drum. "Ward, you're holding our people." Elias stepped back half a pace, feeling the weight of both sides' eyes pinning him in place. B smirked. "Well, now looks like everyone wants their share of the feast." Chaza didn't bother to look at him, though his hand slid to the haft of his spear. The Apache do not let their daughters die in the hands of white men, even those who call themselves saviors. Ahoka stepped from the shadow doorway, standing just behind Elias. "They saved us," she said, her voice as sharp as an arrowhead. Chaza's brow furrowed. Saved or kept as bargaining chips for gold. The wind rose, lashing grit into their faces, blurring the view. Elias could feel the danger swelling. Maddox's men blocked the front, sealing every escape. The Apache lined the western side, bows drawn, ready to loose. This rotting house sat wedged between 2 jaws of steel, and it would take only a spark to blow it all apart. Bomax broke the silence. "Chosa, we only want the girls. Well, give them back when we're done." Chasa's words came slow, hard as stone. "You touch them and your blood will feed this ground." Elias glanced over his shoulder. Naira's small hands clenched around her knife, eyes wide with fear. He knew if this standoff slipped any further, blood would spill, and most likely it would be theirs. Through the wind and the restless stamping of hooves, Chaza urged his horse a step forward, locking eyes with Elias. "Choose, Ward. Give them to me, or I'll count you as an enemy." Elias pressed his lips tight, his palm curling harder around his gun. 3 sides, 1 choice, and no way back. The ranchard was so still. Elias could hear the faint creak of saddle leather. Both sides stood frozen, as if waiting for some invisible signal. Cold sweat traced a path down his spine. He knew that if one finger so much as twitched on a trigger, this ground would drink blood. The lanky gunman on Maddox's side shifted his gaze toward Chaza with a spark of challenge. At the same time, an Apache warrior in the backline eased his horse forward, bowring drawn tight. The rasp of leather on Totanu cut sharp through the silence. Then thwack, an arrow slammed into the dirt just in front of Bo Maddox's horse, spraying earth. Bo flinched, his hand dropping to his gun belt. That was the signal. Gunfire cracked loud, brutal, rolling across the valley. Window glass shattered. Splinters of wood filled the air. Horses screamed and reared. Outlaws dove sideways, dragging Naira down behind a rotting table. Ioka lunged to the window, snapped off a shot from her Colt, dropping the lanky gunman right out of his saddle. Chosa spurred forward, leading a wedge of warriors sweeping to the left flank, spears and throwing knives flashing in the sun. Maddox bellowed orders, his men throwing up their rifles and firing into the blur of dust and pounding hoofs. Elias leaned out from the doorway, squeezed off 2 quick shots. One bullet shaved the brim of Maddox's hat. The other sent an Apache warrior tumbling from his horse. He gritted his teeth. There was no right side or wrong side now, only survival. Red dust boiled into a choking haze. Gunfire, hoof beats, and shouted curses tangling into chaos. An arrow struck the porch post, missing Elias's head by less than a hand's width. He fell back, reloading, heart hammering like a war drum. Ioka rushed past him, the back door already swinging wide. "This way." Elias hauled Naira up, running as the hiss of bullets and arrows tore the air behind them. They bolted past a collapsed horse. From there, Elias caught the whole battle in a glance. Maddox down in the dust, still firing. Chosa locked in with 2 gunmen. Blood and grit smeared together. An Apache warrior hurled a spear clean through the shoulder of the red scarf brute, dropping him screaming to the dirt. Elias knew they couldn't stay. Whoever won this fight wouldn't spare the sisters or him. He pushed them hard along the line of a broken fence, angling toward a narrow cut in the earth to the north, the only way out of the trap. Behind them, gunfire still thundered, but a fresh wind swept in, carrying with it the scent of freedom and the shadow of dangers yet unseen. The wind cut like a whip, driving red dust and ribbons along the broken fence line. Elias pulled Naira with one hand, glancing over his shoulder. The fight in the front yard had spilled across the open ground. Gunfire, tangled with shouts in both English and Apache, figures and horses locked in a blur inside the haze. Ahoka led the way, slender frame moving quick and sure. They crossed a patch of dry grass, skirting the sagging storage shed. Elias knew this path. It ran toward the narrow canyon, a place where the tight rock walls could lose anyone chasing them. Hoof beats thundered close behind, snapping his head around. Badoo. Blood streamed from a gash on his forehead. His face twisted with rage. A revolver raised high. Elias stopped, shoving Naira toward Ayoka. Keep running. He turned, lifted his Colt, and fired. The shot cracked in the wind. Maddox jerked in the saddle, a bullet tearing across his shoulder, but he stayed mounted. Another shot, this time knocking the wide-brimmed hat clean off his head, forcing his horse to stumble. Maddox roared, but the gap between them widened. Ayoka glanced back, and in her eyes flickered something not trust. Not yet, but no longer the ice-cold weariness she'd carried. Thank you, she said shortly. They ran until the gunfire faded behind them. Ahead loomed a narrow split in the rock, the walls rising sheer shadow swallowing the last of the afternoon light. Ahoka halted, breathing hard. Once we're through here, they won't find us. Not tonight. Elias leaned against the stone, looking at the 2 sisters. If Maddox wanted you dead, he'd have done it. He wants you alive to lead him to the mountain. Ahioka nodded. And if he finds it, the spirit mountain will never be sacred again. Elias stared into the black throat of the canyon. 2 choices stood clear. Turn back toward town, sell the ranch, and walk away, or step into that dark pass and guard a secret worth bleeding for. Naira spoke for the first time. Her voice frail but steady. If you come with us, you're not just saving us. You're saving the tribe. Elias drew his knife, cutting the rope still hanging around Ahoka's neck, letting it fall to the dirt. I paid $5 for that house. Maybe it's time I cover the rest of the cost. Ahoka held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a small nod. No more words. They stepped into the canyon, leaving behind the gold blaze of sunset, and the echo of battle still drifting on the wind. The canyon narrowed, drawing them deep into the heart of the Red Rock Range. The light faded to a dim glow, giving way to the bite of cold air and the low moan of wind sliding through the sheer walls. Naira pressed close to her sister while Elias took the rear, eyes fixed on the mouth of the pass, watching for any shadow that might follow. The air carried the damp scent of earth and resin from the pines. After nearly half an hour of squeezing through twisting narrows, the trail suddenly opened up. Before them lay a hidden valley, veiled in a thin shroud of mist, and at its center rose the Spirit Mountain. A young moon had just climbed above the horizon, casting silver light across its slopes, where natural veins of pure metal glimmered like 1,000 tiny lanterns. But it wasn't the silver that held Elias still. It was the stone figures standing sentinel along the mountainside, shaped by nature, yet unmistakably human in form. The Apache believed these were the petrified ancestors, guarding this land for generations untold. Ahoka sank to her knees, murmuring in an ancient tongue Elias could not understand. Naira laid her small hand on a boulder etched with a spiral pattern. Their eyes softened, but in that softness burned an unyielding resolve. This is a place no one is allowed to betray, Ayoka said, her voice carrying like wind from a far ridge. Elias scanned the valley. One way in, one way out. If Maddox found it, they'd be trapped with nowhere to run. His hand found the grip of his Colt, feeling the weight of a burden he hadn't planned to carry. From somewhere behind, an owl's call echoed the hunter's warning signal. Ayoka stiffened. They know which way we came. Elias turned toward the canyon's dark mouth where the black swallowed all shape and color. He didn't see Maddox, but he knew the man wouldn't quit. Silver and the honor of a tribe was enough to turn any man into a devil. Ioka stepped closer, eyes locked on his. You've chosen this road. From now on, our blood is your blood. Elias gave a faint smile, though his gaze never left the pass. I've guarded plenty of things in my life, but never a mountain. The night wind stirred, rattling the eagle feathers tied to the stone sentinels. Somewhere out there, Maddox's horses might already be pounding the earth. Elias tightened his grip on the gun. Moonlight from the mountain washed over his face, turning his gray eyes to cold steel. If he wants this land, Elias said, he'll have to step over our bodies to take it. The three of them stood in the valley, their backs to the spirit mountain, eyes fixed on the darkness where the enemy would come. And in that stillness, Elias knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a long war. Firelight flickered against the silverlit walls of the spirit mountain. The night wind slipped through the canyon, carrying a long, low wail like the voices of the ancient dead. Elias sat with his back against a boulder, Colt resting across his thigh, eyes on the flames, but mind fixed on the black beyond. There are some things, he murmured, almost to himself, that once your hand closes on them, there's no letting go. I bought a ranch for $5, thinking I was buying a quiet life. But what I bought was a war, and the price for it might be my life. Across from him, Ioka sat with the firelight glinting in the deep black of her eyes. Naira had drifted to sleep beside her sister, her breath light as smoke. Elias glanced toward the canyon, a pit of ink-black shadows, hiding the enemy that crept closer with every hour. Tomorrow they'll come, Elias said, his voice low and heavy as lead. And when they do, I'll find out whether I'm truly a protector or just a damn fool looking to die. The fire cracked and spat, red embers painting his face in a glow like blood. Deep down, Ias felt the truth. The war for the Spirit Mountain had only just begun. Once again, it's been an honor to bring you this story. Tell me what you felt while listening. And if you're eager for the next part, hit the 1 key so I'll know. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next gripping tale from the wild.